So this podcast is an interesting one. We're speaking to Laura Hindle, who took the NMC to the High Court to appeal her suspension sanction. She was supported by the Royal College of Nursing and she won the appeal, which is fantastic. Not many people manage to go down the appeal route, and even fewer are supported by their unions. So this was really a landmark case in many ways. The judge made some very high critical communication around the decision making, both by the NMC the whole way through the process and also during the panel's determination on facts, impairment, etc. So listen away. This is part one of a long chat I had with Laura. We hope you enjoy it. It's a really important case for us because it tells you all of the things we've been speaking about that are wrong with the NMC fitness to practice process. Hopefully from this, lessons will be learned and things may start to change. If you have any comments about the case or your own case, or just want to speak to somebody about what's going on, please get in touch with us via our website, which is www.nmcwatch.org.uk. You can also find us on most social media platforms and the links are on our website. So, hi Laura, thanks very much for talking to us. We're going to be recording this podcast for you to have a little chat to us about your situation with the NMC and your appeal that you've gone through. So first of all, would you like to just give us a brief introduction into how you came into nursing and what sort of nursing you did and what led you to the position you were in?
Okay, so 1998, as a 16-year-old, I started my pre-nursing at the local hospital.
Yeah.
This led me to, in 2000, starting my nurse training in PEDS. So I did 3 years as the diploma nursing,
Yeah.
which it was then. And then from there, I went to work in neonatal intensive care,
Right.
and did that for just over about 5 years. And I just felt I was getting too qualified, not qualified, but too comfortable in my role really within there. So I decided to challenge myself and I threw myself into A&E. Um, so I did both children and adults in A&E. So I did that for another 5.5 years. And I also worked in the police alongside. I picked up
Right.
so I started off in child protection and then they shut down the child protection unit I was working in. And so they offered me redeployment onto custody. So
Mm-hmm.
I was working 1 day a week in custody and I was doing 2 days a week in A&E. So I became a forensic nurse and custody nurse, which was great until I got assaulted off a prisoner.
Oh, wow.
um, but at the time, me and my husband were trying for a baby. And as a custody nurse, you've still got to work frontline. There's no protection at all. And you start reevaluating your job role at that point. So that's why I ended up going for the nurse position at Stonyhurst.
Right.
Because
Um,
it looked amazing. It looks like Hogwarts. And
just tell us what was Stonyhurst?
so
What?
Stonyhurst is a boarding school
Okay.
for international students and
Okay.
British students. It's quite a renowned boarding school, but it had its own health centre on site, and they
Right.
were looking for a nurse manager. So that's how I came to apply for Stonyhurst.
Okay.
That's where my NMC happened.
Okay. Okay. And how long did you work there before the whole issue with NMC came up?
About it was probably just about 2 years.
Okay. So,
Yeah, it
well,
wasn't a long time. Yeah, I took it in January 16 and I got reported in May of 18.
okay. Okay. So
So
just briefly, what led to you getting referred to the NMC then? What happened?
so I kind of knew really at Stonyhurst there was a lot of fight back from the staff. Um things yeah, it just wasn't a particularly nice environment.
Hmm.
And ultimately I'd got the job over some of the nurses anyway to start with, and as an outsider coming in doing that, that the dynamics of that was quite difficult. that followed by them getting together and ultimately trying to oust me from my job. That's what it came to. So I think it was about 750 pages they ended up giving to the NMC against me.
Well,
Um, Anything and everything they could possibly put together was in that document. And I mean anything and everything.
And did they
Um,
raise these things with the employer first and not got anywhere, or have
no,
they gone straight to the NMC?
no. So what happened was there'd been some issues around where they kept arguing with my manager, my direct manager, saying I wasn't qualified to do the job in their eyes, that but they weren't putting anything down on paper against me. They just kept saying I was young and I didn't have the life experience kind of thing to run that health centre. That's how it kept coming across. And I had endless chats. My manager was extremely supportive, but he was in a very similar situation with his management. So we had common ground, and he tried to support me with these nurses. Like it was very much like they were trying to find bits, but it wasn't anything substantial against me. And he was going, well, do you want to make this formal? And they were like, no, no, we're telling you, and you need to sort it out. And he was saying, but it wasn't even enough to be any concerns. It was, they didn't like how I was managing them in a certain way. So I tried to change my management style. I was taking advice from other boarding school nurses elsewhere, including one who's one of the top boarding schools in the country. And she just said to me, she went, they just need to clear them nurses out of there. That's what needs to happen. And I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And I have to work with this. So can you help me? And she was like, I don't really know what else to offer you, like advice wise. So I started looking. It was really hard. So I'd been there 6 months when we got a change of management, which was when I got my direct line manager then, because I was considering leaving at that point anyway. And then I got told I was getting a new line manager and a new headmaster. So I was like, okay, now we've got to give it a chance.
Yeah.
He came in, reinvigorized. He was like, yeah, we can do this, we can do that. And we did some amazing work together. you know, when I first went into the health centre, there wasn't even any policies and procedures written in this health centre. There was, the stuff that was going on was like, I should have walked straight out the door when as soon as I saw it. But instead I was like, right, I don't give up on a challenge and we can improve it. And this is what I was doing. And, there was medications being given out without PGD system in place. It was just being dispensed, and there was controlled drugs not being locked up. And it was the craziest things that goes against your very nature as a nurse were happening. So yeah, that's how I ended up at Stonyhurst, and I made a lot of changes in a short period of time, and I think that rattled a lot of people. Like, well, I say a lot, the core group of nurses, because I'd come in, I'm like this. I was getting on well with other people. Like I remember one of the first conversations with the nurses were, we are an island in this health centre. We don't bother them and they don't bother us. And I was like, I'm building a bridge to this island.
Basically, you've got a group of people that have been used to being left alone and doing
absolutely. They'd like to just go off midweek into the cafes and go and get their hair done. And I came along and was like, no, you're doing your job. Like, this is what we do. Yeah. So I think that's how a lot of it came about. It was, let's improve standards, let's get things moving, let's be a real force within the school to support pupils. And they just felt completely put out of joint with that even thought of doing that. I wouldn't say a couple of nurses were there for the right reasons, because you get a very generous discount on school fees if you attend. Wow. Okay. Yeah, if you work there. So I think that was the reasoning behind a couple of the nurses, definitely why they were there. There was a lot of, I don't know, it was quite them and us kind of feel, but then it was them and me, because I was working really well with other members of staff. I was making myself very visible. Staff knew they could come and talk to us if they had any issues with pastoral, especially with like some of the pupils. There was some major issues going on, and it was like where they'd got before, like, and staff would say to me, it's just nice that we could actually approach the health centre, because that was not what was happening. It was very much like, it's your problem, you need to get on with it. Whereas I think, you know, I've come in, I was relating with the pupils as well. They'd have a laugh, come in and have a banter with them and a joke with them. And I built some amazing relationships up with what they would, the other nurses deem the problem children. Like, so these were like your ADHD kids, your kids who, you know, didn't really conform, but actually they just needed someone to listen to them and just go, you know what, I weren't that good at school either, but like, let's just get through this. We've just got to get through this bit. And, you know, I think that was a really good stance. Like, they'd come in and they'd ask for me. That didn't go down well, because it was like they should be speaking to any of us, and it's like, yeah, they've built that relationship with me and they want to speak to me. And it's like, if it was my day off, they would wait till I were coming back to come and speak to me. So that started causing divides as well. And obviously just basic knowledge of procedures and policies and being up to date with your practice. That was a major issue as well. Like, I reformed all the physical, social, health, education program. I redid all that because he was very much stuck in the like 80s, early 80s, probably.
So when you were referred, how long was it from being referred to actually having a hearing? I mean, what was the process like for you? Did it go on a long time? Was it?
Yeah. So I got referred in the May 18. I was made aware probably about 18 months later that it was going to go to hearing. And the hearing didn't actually happen until it commenced it was March 23.
Wow.
It commenced, and then it ended in January 24.
Okay.
So the hearing was 34 days over the course of that year.
How many allegations were there? Was there a lot?
Yes, there was multiple. 32 in total actually got to hearing. There was way more than that before. A lot of them got thrown out beforehand by the NMC, but they went forward with 32 in the end.
And how many witnesses did they have?
So they had the 4 nurses, and then they had the 2 independent witnesses of their saying, which was my direct line manager and the HR manager from Stonyhurst. And then I had my witness, who was a member of staff in the health centre, who worked not all the time, but part-time in the health centre, who witnessed a lot of this stuff. And he was actually a paramedic. And if it weren't for him, I don't think I would have even got this far, I'll be honest, because he was the one who was like, you've got to fight this. Whereas, I'll be honest, at the very beginning, I was just like, I want to jump off the multi-story. It was like, that's where my head was at. But he was like, you're going to fight it. They're not allowed to get away with this, and I'm going to help you.
So was it obvious quite early on that it wasn't going to go well, or did you expect it to be heard? You know, were you quite hopeful about the process? Did you think it was going to be quite fair? And
so because of my background being with criminal, I expected it to, you know, the law to work in the fact of how the law should be. And to, like, one of my very first meetings with my barrister was like, you need to get this out of your head. Like, this is now civil. This is the balance of probabilities. And the NMC are the Wild West. They do their own thing. Like, and I was going, but they can't, because that's not the law. And she was going, get that out your head.
Yep.
Get it out of your head now. And that's when I first realized this is not going to be as it should.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a barrister saying that to you, I just was like, at that point, I knew I was in for kangaroo court. That
Right.
is the only way I could describe it. It was kangaroo court is on the horizon here. How it was going to play out.
How did that manifest itself during the hearing? How did you feel that went?
So when the hearing commenced, it was like it came across as really positive. So the witnesses were being ripped apart on the stand by my barrister. You know, the lies were being uncovered. The behaviour, one of the witnesses had a big truculent moment. That's the only way I can describe it on the stand, where she started getting rattled with my barrister and started getting aggressive towards her and questioning how dare she speak to her like that, and she didn't like her tone. And then the chair stopped it temporarily while they got her advice as the witness to get her support and everything else. And I was like, well, they can see what I was dealing with day in, day out now. So this is the behaviour I had to deal with on a daily basis. So yes, this is gonna show in my favour. And then it was like, no, that didn't happen at all. And even when I got the outcome, I literally, because my barrister was like, I think we might get conditions practice. I don't think you're going to get suspended. There's nothing there for a suspension. And she said, I think you're probably going to end up with conditions of practice of some sort. And that's the best we can hope for. And I was like, all right, okay, we can maybe work with that depending on the situation. And then when it came back and it was like, you're suspended for 6 months, I was just like, are you actually joking? Like,
feel like what you heard in the hearing didn't match what the panel.
Absolutely. I was like, did they even sit in the same hearing as us? That's what I said to my barrister. Were they even in the same hearing as what we heard? Like, part of it was like, there was no evidence of the witnesses lying. It was like, but one of them blatantly committed perjury in front of them. That was pointed out by the NMC's own solicitor.
Right.
And it was like, but she actually committed a criminal offence in front of you here, and you've just ignored that. And no evidence of collusion, but yet they were admitting they were meeting up and writing their witness statements together. And we actually had one of the witnesses writing about herself in the third person because it was written by somebody else, and we pointed that out to the panel, and they were just like, no, there's no evidence of collusion. Okay. And it was like, we've just ignored everything. One of the witnesses was repeatedly saying no comment when she got caught out lying. That was completely ignored. And it was just like, okay, what happened? What actually happened here? I have no idea. I'll be honest, my head was just a bit like blown with it all.
So you got a suspension for how many months?
I got 6 months suspension with the 18-month interim until obviously, because I decided to appeal.
So when you got the suspension, what thought process, how did you come to the decision that you wanted to appeal? Because we've had some people before who said, look, it's a 6-month suspension. I don't agree with it. But by the time I've appealed, it'll make it last even longer. So actually, I think I'll just put my head down and just deal with it and then come back after the 6 months. What was your thought process with that?
So when I got the email off the NMC to tell me how I could do my suspended time, what I had to achieve to be able to get my PIN back, it said that I had to admit all the charges. And it was like, when they didn't happen, some of them just didn't even happen, or they were fabricated to a point where it was just farcical, really. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm never going to put my name to that because that didn't happen. And then they said that I had to write a letter of apology to all these nurses involved. And sit and basically be remorseful of how my behavior has impacted them. And I was like, impacted them? They've nearly took my life on 3 occasions with this process, and you want me to apologize to them? And the only way I can even explain it was like, it was like a rape victim being blamed for their own rape and having to apologize. That is the only way I can genuinely, like, even, try and explain the situation. And then on top of that, if the panel at the end of the 6 months feel like I've shown enough insight, they may let me return to the register. And if they didn't, they had the right to suspend me further or strike me off. And I was just like, well, I'm never going back to nursing then, clearly, because that's never going to happen. But I'd actually got a job in the police, back in the police as the coroner's officer. And because they had stated I was dishonest in one of my charges, I lost my job in the police as well. And it was like, this is going to follow me for the rest of my life if I don't fight this. Yeah. And so I had very strong conversations with my barrister and my solicitor, because at this point I was like, I don't think I'm ever going back into nursing and everything else. But then my solicitor was like, well, if you're not going back into nursing, the RCM will not support an appeal anyway. And I was like, but I had this job in the police. I'm now losing this job in the police. So whatever job I'm going to go for, this is going to affect, because I've been said that I'm dishonest. But actually, I said to her, I said, I should have the right, like, even if I do go back for the job have a job in the police, to still keep my nursing skills up. I want to do bank work. I want to be able to dip in and out when I want to, and then ultimately rebuild my confidence. And maybe I want to go back into nursing. I could do nursing back in the police. I've done it before. I could do it again. And so she said, right, from that angle, in that case, the RCN are prepared to support your appeal. I'll be honest, my barrister was quite shocked, because everything was like, maybe a probability of winning, possible, but it was like, there was nothing concrete that, yes, this is absolutely.
Normally the RCM will only go to appeal if there's above 51% chance that it's
yeah. And that's what, so they were like, we're going to file and we're going to appeal for you. So they did. Then it was like, but you're going to get hit by the interim suspension. And it was like, okay. And straight after it all, it hit the press. So I then got trashed in the press, and that was just awful, like, because it was the complete narrative of the NMC rather than the truth. So then, the embarrassment of that, like, I do a lot of charity work, and I'd already made them aware because I was under investigation and I needed enhanced DBSs. So they already knew about it. But then now I've been found guilty. So it was like, where do I stand here?
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, DBS were investigating me, but they literally threw it out after like 3 weeks, the DBS. So it was all that impact as well.
Public humiliation, isn't it?
Absolutely. Like, I couldn't even walk around my estate. People knew where I lived, everything, and they were getting looks and everything else. And then it was like, right, okay, I've just got to try and get through until my appeal. So then trying to find a job, that was the next thing. Trying to find work. And
how did you manage financially whilst you weren't working?
I just say I'm very, very lucky that I have a husband who's a police officer. He's an inspector, so he's on a decent wage. But we could have gone under otherwise, I think. I'll be honest, if it weren't for him, I think a few times we would have been in a more difficult financial position. But yeah, I managed to get a job as a care coordinator for an agency in the July. That weren't a great agency to work for. And ultimately, I actually walked out just before Christmas, went with another agency in January, completely different situation, joined them as a care coordinator, got my pin back last Monday. They want me to be their nurse now. It's like straight away last Monday, it was like, there's a new contract, our nurse. And it's a completely different setup. And and it's just nice actually to be in that environment. But
going back, sorry to interrupt.
well, no, it's fine.
Going back to the appeal, so how did that compare to you? So from what you're saying, the NMC side of things was just beyond shocking, just didn't sit at all. So how did you find the appeal process in comparison to the NMC process?
So I had my meeting with my barrister earlier on in the week. My appeal was on the Thursday.
Yep.
And on the Tuesday, me and my barrister had a chat and met up, and we were going through the case, and she was like, I don't know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
She said straight up, she went, they've made some okay points. We've made some okay points. They've got weak points. We have, she said, but you don't need to worry because the appeal's taken care of by the ICN. And we've just got to go in there on Thursday and just do our best with both barrels. And she said, but I don't know the outcome. I can't even, their Skellington and our Skellington. She says, I do not know which way this is going to go.
Right. Okay.
So I was like, oh, this isn't good. And then literally walked into the chamber on the Thursday, and he was basically like, right, okay, this is a really long case. And it was kind of straight away, he was like on the ball of like,
it is incredible, isn't it? Seeing them. I know when I had mine, I mean, it's not, never mind the fact that you're walking into the High Court and it's a foreboding building.
Oh, absolutely.
With your background in criminal nursing and police custody nursing and things, you go there and you think, I remember I literally walked up the steps and I went and turned around and walked back because I was like, I felt like saying I was an imposter. Hang on, this is all, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to waste your time. I'll just here now, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? It is, isn't it?
It is. You just sit there and go,
here. Exactly.
Really
and you go in, and there's the dock, and there's the big place where the judge sits, and you sit there, and your people behind you, and it's a proper business, isn't it?
It is. Like I think I was quite lucky because I was in one of the side courts, so it wasn't as imposing. But as soon as he came out, I think that's the imposing side of it, because obviously the authorities that are straight away in it, and it's like, okay, is he going to like me or is he not? Is he going to believe them or is he going to believe us? And then straight away he was like, it was almost like, why are you wasting my time with this? Like, that's how it came across, not in a horrible way at all. It was very much like, wait a minute, why is this even kind of here? That's the impression I got, was like, and he was going, there's loads of points here, and he just went to my barrister, right, can I just say that 0.2, 3 and 4, like, if you include this in your argument, it would actually make your case stronger. That's what he said to my barrister. And she was like, oh, thank you, my lord. And he was like, and it's okay, you don't have to do it now, I'll accept it afterwards from you, that's great. And she was like, oh, right, thank you, my lord. And she was like, anyway, carried on. And honestly, she came out fighting with my barrister. I cannot, she was incredible. That it was an absolute work of art to, and a privilege to watch, really. And he was very much picking on the points, and he's going, right, okay, asking for clarification, and she was giving it him, and he was very, he absolutely had read my case. He literally memorized it, I think, from back to front, because he was going, oh yes, I have this point and that point and on this point and that, and she was just like, yeah, feeding it all back to him. Like, you've got to remember, I've been with my barrister for like over 5 years at this point, so she knew me inside and out as much as he did. Like, and then
it's incredible, isn't it, watching their brains work?
Absolutely.
Afterwards, trying to explain to people when I had mine, it's almost like watching that scene from The Matrix, where they've got all the files in front of them mentally, and they're tipping them along. Get rid of that, jump to that bit, and they can
absolutely.
They've literally just read your file, and yet they can pick out key points.
Absolutely. And he was just like making little notes as he was going along, and then it was like, we presented our side, and then he says, right, are you ready to start, to the NMC? And she was like, is it possible we can break for lunch now, because I've still got a bit more work to do and everything else. And he was like, okay, we'll break for lunch now. So we went for lunch and it was really nice because like my little crew of people who were together and my barrister, we all went for lunch across the road and then we came back and it was like, right, it's their time now, like to go. And she basically just went, well, I only received this morning. And he was like, right, yeah, I understand. So the skeleton had been written by somebody else, and she'd obviously just been allocated the actual case that morning, which is a very common theme actually in courtrooms. So she was like, I'm sorry, I'm not as prepared as I should be, and everything else. He was like, no, that's fine, but go on, off we go. We've got to go through it, so let's do it. And it was just like she was just falling apart, and he was very politely just tearing her a new one. Basically, he was like just picking at her bit by bit, and then he was going, yes, helpful, thank you, and but like really sarcastic how he was doing it. But it was like it.
So a very different power play.
Absolutely, it was very nice to see that the glove was on the
Yes.
other hand for a change.
Yes.
And it was like all the things I'd kind of had in my head from, like we're saying, this criminal side that I've had this experience from. He was just like, absolutely, and this is the law, and we're imposing the law how it should be. So I was like, yeah, that is absolutely that point. Absolutely, that point should have been, we brought that up, and then he was, the NMC hide behind this, the thing about the witnesses, like they might have lied about one thing but they've not lied about everything potentially. So this is a common theme that they use as part of their defense to push cases through, on whatever evidence that they seem to want to choose from. And he was like, yeah, but when you've got a witness that has lied about 3 or 4 things to a jury, then the other 2 points that they're going to say they've been witness to, the jury's going to think, wait a minute, they've lied about the first 4, so chances are they've lied about the other 2, and you've not actually done that, and that can't happen. So he kind of kept throwing everything back at them, and then he's going, oh, and like one of well, this is going to sound stupid, but one of my charges is in the controlled drugs book. I wrote stopped instead of discontinued. And they said, like the NMC said, that's not best practice. You should have wrote discontinued. Whereas actually it states, as long as it's clear, concise, and legible, that's what the actual, like what the guidelines say.
Yes.
It doesn't say discontinued, no words. It doesn't actually say what you should write. And he was like rolling his eyes. He's going, so you're criticizing her for writing stopped instead of discontinued? And he was like, right, and like rolling his eyes. And
so he was obviously very frustrated as well.
Yeah. And then he said, so he turned around, he said to the NMC barrister, he was like, so you're saying it's best practice, but you've not included that in the determination. So what is the best practice?
Yes.
And she was like, he's like, what is it? He said, I love how people pull out this best practice, but don't actually underpin it with the knowledge.
Yes.
So what is it? Like, and she was just like flustering and just like,
how can you, we see that time and time again, don't we? We're told that well, the evidence of the NMC witnesses was more credible than yours.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me an example of that and show me how it is. Well, no, we're just saying that it was more credible.
And that is what happened.
Fine. Yeah. Okay, fine. So you're basically saying you don't have to justify your decision making, which is bizarre, really. And like you said, best practice as well. Okay, well, where's your expert witness to tell us what the best practice is, or what part of the code of conduct are you quoting in order to, demonstrate what the best practice is? And it's almost like they feel they're above having to justify their actions, which is
exactly
scary, really.
Yeah, and that's where the abuse of power ultimately comes in. As a regulator, that's not a place you should ever be. Like, what's the word? Like showing to people. That is not the kind of behavior
Leading by example.
displaying to
Absolutely.
it. You know, it's like repeatedly you get told, you know, the NMC's there to make sure that they're supporting you and keeping you, you know, following best practice and guidance and the most up-to-date practice you can follow and be the best possible nurse you can. But actually, I've not seen any evidence of that from the NMC. I've just seen them put me in their sights, knowing full well, and this is what I don't understand. They knew full well these nurses had lied right from the outset.
Yeah.
Because
how did they know that? How did they know
so these nurses accused my husband of downloading information off the police systems.
Right.
It was part of my original allegations that were made against me, that I had been given information from my husband off the police systems regarding a situation in the school.
Okay.
That hadn't happened at all. It was me who had that knowledge, skills, and experience of working in the police to know these are the processes and this is how that would be dealt with. But they said my husband had access systems to pass that information on. So ultimately, when my referral came through, that information was in there. My husband had to self-refer himself to the police to be investigated. Wow. So he was then investigated as well. I think his investigation took something like 6 weeks, and it was shut down. They were like, we've footprinted all his IT systems, everything. There's absolutely no evidence to support this whatsoever. And
the evidence
and that was sent to the NMC.
Right.
Okay. So at that point, the NMC should have been like, oh, they've lied about that. They've maybe. The other issue was I actually reported the nurses approximately about, it took me that long. It took me 6 months to be able to write a response to the actual allegations. And I individually wrote a response to every single allegation that they made against me. And ultimately pointed out their lack of knowledge, the breaking their own code of conduct, everything else. These nurses downloaded 246 pieces of patient information off the school systems without permission of any of the pupils, parents, school, whatever. They didn't actually take it to the school when they made the formal complaint. They actually just found a woman off the internet, a HR qualified woman, apparently, who actually was just a HR secretary, who they paid a lot of money to write a report about me. And they shared all this information with her. Now, the school, when they got the complaint,
they weren't dealt with under
No, when I reported these nurses to the NMC and said, look, they've brought the law, the NMC basically wrote back and said, because I was being investigated, it was they didn't quite say it like this, but the letter was basically tit for tat.
Wow.
And I was like, they have brought the law.
Yeah.
And it was completely ignored. Stonyhurst had brushed it under the carpet too. This was when I was like, this isn't great. This is not a great situation to be in. If they can't recognise, these nurses have openly told the NMC they've broken the law by presenting them with this information. The school couldn't even give me a copy of the complaint for 2 days because it took them that long to redact it. That's how much personal information there was in the complaint. And that went to Board of Governors, that went out to the NMC, and it had been shared with this lady who they found off the internet. I think they ended up paying her about £4,000 in the end to write a report on me, which was absolutely horrific. It just made me out to be.
Get to a point where you think, have I misunderstood how I've come across here? Am I actually this person that they're describing?
It was. I was basically. I might as well have been, an abuser, because that's how it was written about me. Which was.
Do you need to stop?
It's fine.
Okay. It's terrifying, isn't it, to know what lengths some people can go to, break the law, break break their professional code of conduct and be allowed to get away with it without any impact whatsoever, because the people that are investigating are just solely looking at how to prove this case against this one person. And that's my biggest fear, I suppose, with the whole of FTP, is they should be investigating, and I must sound like a broken record, but they should be investigating neutrally. They've got these allegations before them, and they should be investigating every aspect to maintain public safety. And that's, they're privy to so much information, and they're like the gatekeepers of, potentially the next scandal that comes through. They have been the gatekeepers to, we look at Morecambe Bay, we look at Stafford, or, they've been privy to all this unique information that could potentially then stop, a major public health, whatever issue, patient safety issue happening, and they don't. And it's criminal, really. And they're consequently not dealing with the people that they should be.
In part 2 of my chat with Laura, we talked a bit more about her own case, and then more broadly about some of the issues that arose from her experience. Do join us for that in part 2, and thanks for listening.